welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into some difficult territory.
Yeah.
We're trying to understand the motivations and, well, the characteristics of individuals and groups involved in terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I get it. For many people listening, this topic might spark some really strong negative reactions
Yeah.
immediately.
Absolutely. And maybe even an unwillingness to engage with it, right? That feeling like understanding equals condoning.
Exactly, that discomfort.
And that discomfort, while totally understandable, is kind of why we felt this deep dive is important.
Right.
Our goal here isn't about excusing or justifying terrorism, not at all.
No.
It's about using the tools we have, sociology, psychology,
Yeah.
to look past those initial gut feelings and explore the complex reasons why individuals might go down that path.
So we're drawing on academic work.
Yeah, academic literature, case studies,
Mm.
basically trying to get an evidence-based understanding, even if it pushes against what we first assume.
Okay. Yeah, we've definitely looked through a lot of studies, sociology, psychology, analyses of radicalization, case studies.
It's a lot.
It is. So let's start by unpacking a really common perception, maybe the biggest one.
Which is?
The idea that terrorists are just, well, mentally ill.
Yeah. The madman stereotype. That's crucial to tackle right away.
Because it seems logical, almost, that someone doing such extreme things must be psychologically disturbed.
It seems logical. But interestingly, the vast majority of research, it points the other way.
Really?
Yeah. Many studies conclude that, and this is a quote often used, the outstanding common characteristic of terrorists is their normality.
Their normality. Wow.
Mm.
Generally, they don't show any striking psychopathology.
It's hard to wrap your head around. How can people doing these things be considered normal?
It is challenging, but think about it from the group's perspective. Terrorist organizations often have pretty selective recruitment.
They need people who are disciplined, who can follow plans, who are, rational within the group's own logic.
Not someone erratic.
Exactly. Someone with unpredictable behavior, maybe severe mental illness, could actually be a liability. They often actively screen those individuals out.
Huh. Okay. So, not the image of someone completely detached from reality.
Generally, yeah.
Which brings up another really powerful image.
Yeah.
The suicidal fanatic. Doesn't that imply some kind of break from rational thought?
Well, the idea of fanaticism is definitely tied strongly to terrorism in the public mind, especially with suicide attacks.
Right.
And yeah, the term implies really extreme beliefs. But it's important to understand it's not actually a clinical diagnosis. It's not a mental illness category.
So just holding extreme beliefs isn't the same as being mentally ill.
Correct. And also the idea of fanaticism itself isn't just religious anymore. It's broadened to include, rigidly held extreme beliefs of all kinds. So while their actions might seem totally irrational to us, that doesn't automatically mean they have a diagnosable mental health condition driving it.
Okay. So if it's not usually mental illness, and even fanaticism isn't quite the explanation we might think.
Yeah.
How do individuals get to the point of committing such violence if they're not, inherently abnormal psychologically?
That's where this concept of moral disengagement comes in. It's really insightful.
Moral disengagement.
Yeah. Psychologist Albert Bandura wrote a lot about this. Basically, individuals and groups use certain psychological tricks, you could say, to rationalize their actions, to distance themselves from the harm they cause.
Like what? What kind of techniques?
Well, one big one is moral justification, framing the violence as serving some higher purpose.
Fighting for a noble cause, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Fighting against a perceived greater evil, defending their people. They basically see themselves as the good guys, the heroes even.
So they genuinely believe they're right within their own worldview.
Within their framework, yes. Then there's displacement of responsibility. Feeling less personally responsible because you're just following orders from someone higher up in the group.
Ooh, okay. Shifting the blame.
And a really disturbing one is dehumanization of victims.
That sounds chilling.
It is. It's stripping the targets of their human qualities, calling them infidels or enemies or tools of the system, whatever label fits the ideology.
And that makes it easier to hurt them.
Psychologically, yes. If you see your victims as less than human, it lowers the barrier to inflicting violence.
Wow. It's quite a look at how those internal barriers can be broken down. So, okay, if it's not mainly mental illness driving this,
Yeah.
what factors actually lead people to join these groups?
It's usually a mix of things, rarely just one factor.
Right.
For some, it's about finding an identity, especially, during big life transitions, adolescence, young adulthood.
Feeling a bit lost.
Yeah. And extremist ideologies can seem appealing because they offer very clear, often simple answers to really complex world problems, plus a strong sense of belonging.
That need for community must be huge.
Oh, absolutely. It's fundamental, isn't it? The need to belong.
Yeah.
So, if someone feels marginalized or cut off from mainstream society,
Alienated.
exactly, a group like this can offer a really powerful sense of community, a place where they feel, accepted, valued, understood. That camaraderie can be a huge pull.
And finding meaning, too.
Yes, the search for meaning or significance. Some people just want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, making a difference. Extremist causes can offer that, a sense of purpose, even if it involves violence.
And once someone's in, I imagine the group itself keeps them there.
For sure.
Mm.
Group dynamics are incredibly powerful. There's immense pressure to conform.
Fit in, yeah.
Fit in, keep your status, prove your loyalty. And often that involves pressure to actually participate in violence.
Right, as a test or something.
Sometimes, yeah. And within the group, violence can become normalized. People adopt what some call a terrorist rationalization of violence.
How does that work?
They convince themselves it serves a greater good. They might even say they, quote, love only the socially redeeming qualities of their violence, focusing only on the supposed positive outcomes, ignoring the brutality.
Compartmentalizing the horror, basically.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, let's widen the lens a bit. What about the role of grievances and ideology? What are the sparks?
Perceived injustice is often a really big factor. Inequality.
Things feeling unfair.
Deeply unfair. There's this concept, relative deprivation.
Relative deprivation.
Yeah, it's the gap between what people feel they deserve or expect and what they see as their actual reality.
And those grievances can be varied.
Oh, definitely. Economic hardship, ethnic discrimination, political oppression, religious persecution, social exclusion, directed at governments or whole systems.
And ideology is the framework that makes sense of those grievances.
Yeah.
And justifies the response.
Precisely. Ideology, whether it's political or religious, shapes how those grievances are understood and, crucially, how people decide to act on them.
Even for secular groups.
Oh, yeah. Even secular terrorist groups have strong ideological imperatives that frame their worldview and justify their actions.
And for religious groups.
Religiously motivated groups often take it further. They might see their actions as having a moral mandate or even a divine mandate.
Mentioned by God, essentially.
Right. Believing a higher power approves or even commands their actions. We see this with the concept of istishhad, or martyrdom, among some Islamists, or how the Tamil Tigers viewed their actions. It's seen as a sacred act.
It's so important to grasp those internal belief systems, isn't it? Even if we completely reject them.
Crucial, because it also relates to how terrorism is defined.
How so?
Well, one group's terrorist might be another group's freedom fighter.
Yeah, that old saying.
It's true, though. Think about the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, for example. Labeled terrorists by some, seen as liberators by others.
It really depends on your perspective, your politics.
Exactly. The label itself is often contested, subjective.
It really shows the complexity. We can't just use simple labels. Okay, what about sociological characteristics? Are there patterns in who gets involved? Has that changed over time?
The profiles have definitely shifted. If you look back, say, during the Cold War in Europe,
Yeah.
a lot of the members of groups then tended to be like urban, middle class, pretty well educated, mostly young men.
Okay, that's quite specific.
It was for certain groups and times, but that profile doesn't really fit many contemporary groups accurately at all.
So it's more diverse now.
Much more diverse in terms of socioeconomic background, education levels, origins. It really depends on the specific group and context.
And where do they tend to recruit from? Is it mostly cities or rural areas?
Often groups recruit heavily from the areas where they operate.
Makes sense. Local knowledge.
Exactly. Strategic advantage. So urban groups often recruit from urban populations, rural guerrilla groups from rural areas. Familiarity is key.
And it's not just men involved, right? We hear more about women's roles now.
Absolutely not just men. Women have always played significant roles, though perhaps less visibly sometimes.
In what ways?
All sorts. Logistical support, intelligence gathering, active participation in attacks, even leadership roles. You see examples in the IRA, ETA in Spain, Italian groups.
Right.
In some cases, especially when lots of male members were arrested or killed, women's roles actually became even more central to keeping the organization going.
So again, much more complex than the stereotypes suggest.
Definitely.
Okay, one framework we look at that I found really interesting was thinking about radicalization, like a contagion.
Ah, yes. The epidemiological analogy.
Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. It basically compares the spread of radical ideas through social networks to how diseases spread in a population.
So ideas are like germs?
In a metaphorical sense, yeah. The core idea is that this ideological infection is more likely between people who are already connected.
How connected?
Various ways. Close physical proximity, like living in the same neighborhood, but also ideological closeness, similar socioeconomic status, shared psychological traits, or vulnerabilities.
So it spreads through existing networks,
Right.
friendships, communities.
Exactly. Those social and spatial networks act like pathways for the ideas to travel. If you're embedded in a network where extremist views are common,
You're more likely to pick them up.
higher risk of being influenced, yeah. And this view also shapes counterterrorism thinking.
How?
Well, strategies might focus on disrupting those recruitment networks, weakening the group's structure, basically trying to stop the spread.
And different types of groups might need different approaches.
Right, a very hierarchical group might be disrupted differently than a more decentralized network of cells. It depends on how the contagion operates within that specific structure.
It's a really compelling way to visualize it. Okay, finally, we glanced at a few specific case studies. Without going into every detail, what do they tell us overall?
I think the main thing that case studies do is just hammer home the sheer variety of motivations and backgrounds.
Right. No single template.
Not at all. You look at Renato Curcio, founder of the Red Brigades in Italy,
Yeah.
driven by a very specific interpretation of Marxism, reacting to political events there, completely different from, say, Leila Khaled.
Of the PFLP.
Right, motivated by Palestinian nationalism and liberation. Then you have someone like Mahmoud Abu Halima,
The World Trade Center bomber.
involved in the 93 bombing, yeah. Seemingly driven by this intense hatred connected with radical Islamist groups. Very different again from Osama bin Laden.
Whose path seemed tied to religious conviction after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
Exactly. And this vision of a global struggle. Then there's Vellupillai Prabhakaran, the LTTE leader in Sri Lanka.
Tamil nationalism.
Pure Tamil nationalism. And then you get someone like Shoko Asahara, the Aum Shinrikyo cult leader in Japan.
Who used sarin gas.
Yeah. His motivation seemed rooted in paranoia, this bizarre apocalyptic religious view involving weapons of mass destruction.
Such a wide spectrum. Different ideologies, personal histories.
Totally. These snapshots just show there's no single terrorist profile, no one-size-fits-all explanation.
So, wrapping this deep dive up, what are the main things we should really take away?
I think the absolute key is the complexity. Terrorism isn't simple. It comes from this interplay of individual psychology, powerful group dynamics, real or perceived grievances, and these compelling ideologies.
In that simple idea of the terrorist as just a mentally ill fanatic.
It's just not supported by the evidence, overwhelmingly. It's a harmful oversimplification.
And why is it so important to try and get this more nuanced understanding? Especially if, as we said at the start, the topic makes you uncomfortable.
Because if we want to develop effective counterterrorism strategies,
Yeah.
they have to be based on reality, not stereotypes. If our understanding is flawed, our responses will likely be flawed too, and probably less successful at actually preventing violence. Grappling with the real complexities why people join, how they're radicalized, lets us potentially create more targeted, smarter interventions.
Makes sense. So for you, the listener, maybe the final thought to chew on is this.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to think about how our own biases, maybe our own negative feelings about this topic, and the easy, simple narratives we often hear, how they might actually get in the way.
Get in the way of truly understanding.
Exactly. Understanding something complex like terrorism, do our gut reactions and preconceived ideas sometimes stop us from seeing the full picture? And could that hinder finding better solutions? Maybe that willingness to engage with uncomfortable truths based on evidence is actually the most crucial step.